So I'll be talking about my experience regarding imaging devices, large devices, in particular image-guided therapy. So I thought I would compare it to delirium dive as well. So I left Poland almost 20 years ago, moved to Canada, and I just wanted you to go through some eras of large medical devices, and I was there, and I wanted to make you aware not to get stuck somewhere in the middle of the snow regarding medical devices. So large imaging medical devices are expensive technology. So I'm talking about the big machines like MRI, CT, or PET. So the cost of these machines is around $1 to $2, sometimes $5 million. The time of development is quite long, and it's basically what is needed. You have first to make a product, and then finally get FDA or European FDA approval. That takes time and money. So it's a long, expensive process. Development is usually order of $50 million. So should we ever decide for this path, it's very expensive and a long way to go. Funding, I believe, yes, you can apply for some research agencies, but in my opinion, there is no real support for real innovation. It's just support for the progressive advancement of the science rather than for real innovation. Big company strategy is watch and wait, usually. So they're basically not really interested in developing new technologies, but rather supporting, but not financially supporting. And when I talked to Siemens, for example, they said, okay, if you sell that 100 units worth about $200 million, come back to us, maybe we'll talk to you. So where you can get the support from? It's mostly from private investors, I guess. That's the only real way to get the funding from, which is also not easy. From my experience, I travel all around the world trying to convince investors to invest into these big investments. And it's costs a lot of stamina and a lot of experience, not necessarily with business, but in other areas as well. For example, I remember I went to Beijing and the Tiananmen Square, building 10 times bigger than that. It was two of us, one friend of mine from Australia and myself. We both experienced with negotiating, mostly drinking, but it was 50 Chinese generals, and it's very difficult to stand 50 Chinese generals, and you should, if you have an opportunity, go there and find out what the white wine and the red wine is about in China. Took us a couple of days to recover after those negotiations. So obviously the other option, the smaller devices. You can focus on smaller devices rather than large medical devices, so like MRI, CT. That's probably the better option. But I'm focusing on the large devices. So here is the short business model that you can agree, you cannot agree with. Should you ever be involved in things like that, it's always good to have a model for research and business-oriented sort of bio-institution. So what is important is the close collaboration between industry and the institution. In the case of bio, it's always good to have a hospital you collaborate with. It's the scientific institution, hospital, and then have a collaboration with industry that comes with you problems. And this problem, one of the problems is how to support this type of initiative, right? So basically, you talk to a company, then you eventually come up with a agreement with them. Takes a while to come an agreement. Then eventually they provide you some support in the forms of some funding. Usually everybody is happy in that institution because everything goes up, the incomes go up, and so the institution is quite happy with. So we provide, the scientists provide a solution, a biotechnical solution, and finally industry is also happy with, problem disappears for the company, and eventually more money comes to that institution in the forms of royalties, for example. So that seems to be working quite well, and you can basically work on larger projects this way. And this hopefully goes around. So you develop one product and continue with other products. Here I just wanted to emphasize the need for close collaboration between industry, medical doctors, and researchers. So basically, it's the researchers, I believe, should be the link between, for example, medical doctors and industry. Obviously, some funding is needed from private investors, as we said, or from some companies. So I will be talking about collaboration and the way of dealing with some issues. I'll give some examples how it could be done. So I'll provide some examples of the product that we have developed, the intraoperative MRI, robotic arms, and the MRI in the space. Just select few. So why, sorry if this will be a little bit too boring from your perspective. Just, I'm trying to see you, but if I see you, don't see me, and vice versa. So the lights is quite bright. But let's, okay. So what are the current challenges regarding tumor removal, for example, right? Because what do we need MRI, what do we need imaging technology for? The precision of cancer removal like surgery, gamma knife, and other devices has really increased, but image resolution still remains more or less the same. You can get pre-surgery image, but not necessarily during the surgery. So therefore, there is some needs for imaging. So in the case of MRI, this is higher resolution. There are some ways of providing this higher resolution of MRI. Some technological development can be done. You can increase specificity, sensitivity as well, basically find out with a higher precision what type of tumor it is and where it is. We can do patient-specific diagnosis and treatment. We can apply multimodal imaging, such as MRI, CT, infrared, and so on. Or more information on the tumor can be provided by delivering or providing new technologies like MR elastography, for example. And finally, simultaneous imaging and therapy can also be accomplished. And usually the problem is to make it as cheap as possible. So I will start from intraoperative MRI and a very short history of brain surgery from alcohol to image-guided surgery. So some time ago, a long time ago, the surgery was very primitive, that is brain surgery. As I said, it was mostly alcohol and a hammer or a knife or something like that to open the brain in certain cases. Then it was a long time before the anesthetics were introduced, really break in the history of brain surgery, and quite recently the bulb was introduced to the operating theater. Obviously, this is really simplification, but not that much was really done regarding the brain surgeries, and we believe we really introduced something really, really new. So our proposal was basically intraoperative MRI. So MRI provides quite a lot of useful information itself. Now I will have to click here. I don't know how much you know about MRI itself, but currently MRI not only provides information about structure of the brain, but also some functional information. For example, here you can see where the blood vessel is, where the neuronal tracts are, and finally where the tumor is. And also where the functions of certain brain function is located, so you can avoid this area when doing the surgery. So therefore, we thought it would be very interesting and very useful to be able to do the brain surgery during the surgery, actually, okay? So here was the concept, very primitive magnet. You have to have the magnet to get an image. And this magnet usually sits in one place. I'm sure you probably saw MRI. But in this case, the magnet can actually move over the patient as many times as needed. So that's how it was accomplished in the clinical environment. So the pre-production or the idea was accomplished in the institute, and then the pre-production model was installed in the hospital. Let's see if it works. That's how it looks like right now. So the magnet sits in the docking area when it's not needed, and when it's during the surgery, you can move it over the patient, okay? As many times as needed during the brain surgery. And this is just a short movie. So the company was created. Let me see if, oops.
Is sometimes the difference between
Oops, sorry.
is sometimes the difference between used within the walls of the operating room. The fact that the magnet is brought to the patient rather than bringing the patient to the magnet has several major advantages. The IMRIS system ensures that the integrity of the sterile field is maintained throughout the entire procedure. This radically reduces the risk of infection or other complications resulting from moving the patient. No expensive specialized MRI-compatible surgical equipment is required. The system of IMRIS has the only system that allows the magnet to move into a second room in order to accommodate.
So as you can see, that's how this intraoperative MRI works. And several installations, or over 100 installations across the world was done since then. Now the next step was actually to combine this MRI with robotic arms. So we know that we can basically obtain an MRI image during the brain surgery. The question was then, can we actually improve the brain surgery having information from MRI? So that's the idea of applying or using those robotic arms. So you can see two robots are basically used. Somebody told me that selecting those robots was not really the best idea. However, that's what was the idea about. And you can see here a realization of this project, that you can see how the robots, this is the robotic arm, how the robots performing the surgery. Okay? So the neurosurgeon sitting somewhere, they usually like sit on the beach and doing the surgery from wherever it's comfortable for them. And the patient can be anywhere. You probably know about such system for cardiac surgery, but brain surgery, I was told, is very different than just cardiac images. So this is the very first brain images, brain surgery with this robotic arm. So here's the concept and the first surgery with the assistance of the robotic arm. So why we need those robotics? Basically, you can increase precision. You can apply totally new techniques. What is important here, you can basically quantify the brain surgery. So far, how the neurosurgeons are being trained. Well, basically use the cadavers or animals to practice, and then more experienced surgeons tells them, okay, push harder or softer, rather than applying particular amount of force, like 10 newtons, 20 newtons, whatever it is. With robotic arms, it's possible. You can also increase the precision of the surgery by moving this 1 millimeter here and 0.1 millimeter over there, right? So the precision can be increased significantly. And this could be used for training, right? As I said right now, the training of neurosurgeons is quite primitive. And it could be translated into very high resolution imaging, molecular imaging and nanotechnology. This is just an example how precise the tools must be to be able to get into the brain to the right spot. So we can basically, using these robotic arms, if somebody is using a robotic arm, it's not just using the arms without any feeling. We have the haptic system that allows the feedback from the brain. So you can basically, the surgeon can feel how hard this action happens in the brain. Can feel the touch, sight and sound, all the same. Novel technologies have to be applied. With MRI, you cannot put anything inside of MRI. You have to, everything has to be MRI compatible. So new technologies has had to be developed as well. It's made of all this stuff has to be made out of plastic, for example, proper plastic, to make sure that there is no artifacts in MRI images. That was the very first picture, the idea again of the robot working on the brain, and then the robot working inside of the magnet. That's the next step. I think I can try to show you another movie. This technology we are able to apply because Canada designed this Canadarm in the space. So we make a deal with that company, and that company provided some components for the robotic. So as you can see how the space technology can be moved down to the Earth. So right now we are going to the hospital. It's an operating theater. The robot is brought to the patient, and you can do the brain surgery based on the space technology. And neurosurgeon can be, as I said, in any place. Like for example here. What is interesting that people who are working on the brain, they usually don't look into the brain, they look into monitors. And then you can see those monitors providing information from MRI, CT, microscope, whatever you want to use. Okay. So now we are talking about bringing that space technology into the Earth. Now how about the other way around? I mentioned about the need of really collaboration, close collaboration between medical doctors and the scientists. And I work with Dr. Sutherland, who is the head of neurosurgery at the University of Calgary. And one day he asked me, when can you do MRI in the space? And I wanted to mention about this because I wanted to let you know that I think every problem has a solution. So he comes to me and asks me, can you do MRI in the space? Well, I said, sure, we can do it if you really want. But why do you want to do the surgery in the space? Well, he said, if somebody flies to Mars, I would like to be able to do the brain surgery on this guy. Then I thought about this. Well, I said, well, Garnet, then you have a couple of problems. And then he said, what's your problem again, right? I'm the physicist, so you only, doctors, they see us as a problem. I have two problems. One problem is speed of light, and the second problem is the weight of this stuff that's going to be brought over there. So Garnet looked at me and asked me, so how much time do you need to fix those problems? Well, then I said, well, it depends how much you pay, right? So I will show you how it's possible to solve this problem as well, which seems to be quite difficult to solve, right? So we have a challenge, speed of light. You know, the problem is if somebody flies really to Mars and you want to do the brain surgery on this guy who is flying on the Mars and you sit here on the Earth, it takes few minutes for the light to go there and get back. And you don't want to have this delay, right? So the question is how to deal with this stuff. Can you really speed up the speed of light, which is quite tricky, right? Another problem is the weight. By the weight of the stuff that you ship over there is maybe not so big problem, because if you have enough money, you can probably send it over there. But it's also not that simple. So there is always a solution to each problem. That's my message. So let's go to flight simulators, right? As you know, the pilots are right now using flight simulators before they actually fly. So that's we came with an idea of doing the same thing for surgeons, right? For neurosurgeons. So we can basically use this virtual reality system for neurosurgery. So that's one solution, right? Because you can, if you know how to install the MRI in the space, you can then do imaging there without anybody, it's possible. Send this information on Earth, information about the patient and all the image. Then on Earth, we can simulate the brain surgery, then send this information to the space station, and to wish good luck to the astronauts who are there, right? Who eventually get sick. But that's the solution, right? I'm not talking about this be applied tomorrow, but it's the technology of the future, should people decide really to go to Mars. I will get back to that later on. Other problem is the weight of these devices that we want to ship over there, right? It's the magnet, the regular magnet, that's how it looks like. It's 3 tons. There are other magnets that are up to 16 tons, so it's quite heavy stuff. And to ship this stuff to somewhere to the space station, it takes a lot of money, and you cannot really that easily to send 10 tons up there. So what's the solution? Well, let's go to 1987. You may not recognize this guy, but it's myself. This is Paul Lautenbourg and my supervisors. And this guy, it's 3 of them already are dead. I guess it's my turn right now. This guy is still in Vancouver. So it's 1987, and we talk about how MRI is being created, right? And to get an MRI image, you really need something what is called gradients of the magnetic field. And it's 2003, and he gets the Nobel Prize for discovery of MRI. And it was more than 20 years, right? 30 years almost when they discovered this stuff. And then in 2007, we came up with the concept that you don't really need the gradients to get an MRI image. I will not talk about details. I'm sure you would like to see all the details, but I will talk about the consequences. So we can do, here you can see the first images without the gradients of the magnetic field. You may wonder why it's so important. Well, the biggest part of the MRI is magnet and the gradients of the magnetic field. And this technology allows to get rid of all these big components, gradients, and also we can make the different magnet. So we get rid of a lot of components, gradients and the magnet, so we can design totally new magnet. It looks like this, and we already made a prototype. And I have to go here. So using this technology, what we can do then? We can propose totally new MRI, which basically looks like this. I really like the Star Trek, so it looks like Star Trek. So you can imagine what happens. This ring moves over the patient. And then once it's moved to the end, you can get an image. Well, that's the idea. It's still not working yet. We just need to find some investors into this. So, but this technology allows eventually to do MRI in the space station, International Space Station. Here are the costs of one kilogram. That's how much it costs to ship it over there. So we have been working on MRI in the space. And it has to be light, and also everything has to fit into these dimensions, right? The payload standard rack that is being shipped over there, which is quite challenging because I mentioned about this that it's about 10 tons, right? So we really have to apply new technology to put it over there. And that's the vision, how this MRI is going to look like over there. So this stuff moves over the patient, you can get an image of the entire image of the person, of an astronaut, right? The same technology could be eventually applied on Earth if you want. And this system could be sold for $100,000 and could sit in any medical doctor office. Obviously, there is another solution. I don't know if you've heard about this solution. So rather than doing the brain surgery on people flying on Mars, you can just give them one-way ticket, right? And you know a lot of people applied for this. I don't know, like about 20,000 around the world. So a lot of people, many people are willing to pay quite a lot of monies to fly one way to Mars. So that's another solution. As I said, there's always the problem, is always the solution, until finally we found the real problem, which may eventually happen as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Any questions to Dr. Tomanek? We have a couple of minutes. Hold on.
Thank you. I have a question related to medical education. Do you see any issues in that field? How to let physicians and other people learn how to use the technology? Do you see any opportunities for startups, for educational medical education providers in your field?
It's a very good question. Yes, I could talk about this for hours, really. I did mention that the collaboration with medical doctor is very important. I did not mention that the collaboration with the open-minded medical doctors is needed. And I brought the example of Dr. Sutherland, who really thinks about future. But when it comes to medical doctors, people who work on daily basis with patients, to convince them to new technology is extremely difficult. Even radiologists, for example, right? As probably most of us know that computers could do a lot of diagnosis right now. But it's very difficult to convince them that we can help them with something. So this introduction of new technology to medical area takes long time. So education there is absolutely needed. I understand that people are quite so much concerned because so many products that not always are probably as good as companies advertise them, but still at least would be good to have some medical doctors as open-minded as possible, yes. I deal with radiologists a lot, it's the problem.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up there. Once again, many thanks to Dr. Tomanek, and we're going to have a 5-minute break, so thank you very much.
Thank you.